This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. This episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox, is brought to you by 3D Connection, makers of the Space Navigator. To learn more about them, visit their website at www.3dconnection.com. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 31. Now today I'm going to show you how to insert appliances into our kitchen. Now we're going to do two appliances in particular. We're going to do a fridge, which is going to involve pushing back and removing a certain portion of our cabinets, and I'm also going to show you how to install a sink. Now with the sink, we're going to use a different technique called intersecting, which is a little bit more complex than that which we've done in the past, but it's extremely powerful. Let me show you. Before we start, I just want to point something out. I got an email from Richard this past week, and he was asking what exactly the lesson files that I talk about that are in the show notes of each episode, what exactly those things are. And I just want to clear that up a little bit. It's actually a pretty good question. The lesson files for each project are SketchUp documents, SketchUp projects that I post to our show notes that are basically, they correspond with each episode. So for example, if you go to the show notes for this episode, you will be able to download this model as it is right now. Not as it is at the end of this episode, but as it is right now as a starting point for you. So you'll be able to download this exact model as it is right now and follow along with me, and then we can model this together if you want to go with it that way. So that's one way you can learn. Just wanted to kind of clear that up, and I really want to thank Richard for sending in that email. Now, let's go ahead and get started on the appliances that we're going to add in here. Now, adding appliances is actually pretty easy. We've talked about getting things from the 3D warehouse, and that's how we're going to do this. But what we haven't really covered before is how to do appliances with cabinets, because, when you add appliances to cabinets that have already been modeled, like these here, then you actually have to carve out a space for each one of these appliances. You can't just stick them in there because we have cabinets everywhere right now. Now, in some cases, if you already knew where you wanted your appliances to go, you could add those first and then draw the cabinets around them. But in this case, I really wanted to have my cabinets drawn first and then my appliances. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to do the cabinets first, which we've already done, and now we're going to add in the appliances and carve out some nice slots for them. And we're going to start with something that's actually going to be pretty easy, and that's going to be a fridge. We're going to put the fridge right here at this wall right here. Now, to get the fridge, I like to, with appliances, because they're relatively complex models, you could model it from scratch, certainly. But what I like to do is I like to go to the 3D warehouse, which I have the 3D warehouse button in my toolbar right up here. It's the box with the yellow triangle, or the yellow arrow that says Get Models. Or you can go up to the File menu and choose File, 3D Warehouse, Get Models. Either way, it'll open up this browser right here. And now what we can do is we can just search for whatever it is we want. So in this case, I'm going to do a search for a fridge. I'm going to go with this one right here. This is a stainless steel fridge. That looks really, really nice. Switch to the 3D view and just kind of get a little bit of a 360 here. That looks really nice. I think that'll work out really well. So I'm going to go ahead and click Download Model, and it's going to say, do you want to load this directly into your Google SketchUp model? I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now it's going to put this in my model. It's automatically switched me the Move tool. Now, one thing that I really don't like about the way that it goes into your model is that you don't really have any control over where you've grabbed the model from. So like my move tool at the moment is somewhere kind of like in the middle of the model right now, and it's really difficult for me to get it to snap into something. You see, like right now it's like sunken into the floor. So what I like to do in this case, particularly when sometimes a model will work okay, but other times when you bring it in, you just can't get it to fit where you like it. I like to stick it outside of my house first, and then work with it out here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch to the selection tool and just click off here and give the model a good once over. Just make sure it looks good. The size of everything seems right. Sometimes you'll get a model where the fridge will be like a foot high or 30 feet high and you'll need to scale it. But this looks really nice. Got some very nice details on the front here. I think this will work really well. So the first thing I want to do is figure out, okay, where do I want my fridge to go? And in this case, I want it to be up against this wall here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the fridge so it's facing the right way. Now you could use the rotate tool for this, but in our last episode, you'll remember I showed you a trick where if you select a group, and this is a group, and use the move tool, as you hover over a face, you get these little red crosshairs here. And if you click on any one of those, oops, there we go, you can rotate it without having to switch to the rotate tool. And then you can actually snap it to these lines right here and choose, in this case it's snapping to 180 degrees, click, and now it's oriented the correct way. Now the next thing is to figure out, okay, how much of these cabinets am I going to need to get rid of? Now I'm going to show you how you get rid of the cabinets in a second, but for now let's just figure out how many of those cabinet units we want to get rid of. So let's see here. Each one of my cabinet units is 2 feet, and let me measure how wide this fridge is. Use the tape measure tool and just do a quick measurement here. 3'6". That's about right. I don't want to shrink it down to only a 2 foot wide fridge because that's a little bit weird. So it's about 3'6", 3.5 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and round that up. Let's say we want to give it a 4 foot space. So I'm going to get rid of 2 of these cabinet sections right here. So I'll show you how we can do that. There's 2 ways to do it. One is it's a pretty simple way of just kind of pushing and pulling stuff back. If you're adding things to an edge like this, it works pretty well. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I want to get rid of these 2 units of cabinets down here as well as up here because the fridge is tall. So the first thing, we'll start with the upper cabinets here. Now I've grouped all of this together. So I'm going to double click once to enter the group. And now I can select these doors here. So I'll just go ahead and delete these. Don't need to push pull anything or anything like that. Select one, delete, 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 delete. There we go. So these 2 units are going to go away. If I would just push pull this side back here, I can't go any further than that because of those shelves. So let me show you what you can do to fix this. Basically, a really simple way to do this is actually to not use the push-pull tool at first, but to actually use the line tool and kind of split these a little bit. So remember, we want to get rid of a 4 foot chunk. So let me use the tape measure tool and draw a quick guide like this. Exactly 4 feet. Go ahead and lock it to the red axis by hitting the right arrow key. 4 feet. There we go. So that line right there is where we want to stop. And now I'm going to use the line tool and just real quickly draw a line like that. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. Make sure it's locked to the green axis like that. And now I want to do the same thing down here. There we go. And now I've kind of divided this. Let me go ahead and delete this guide. Right there. Whoops. Forgot. I accidentally got out of the group. And that's kind of tricky because if you once you're in a group like this, if you click on anything outside that group, you exit that group. And you'll notice that my guideline, when I click on it, because that guideline was in that group when I created it, I select that guideline, I select the entire group. So you got to be careful of that. So let me go ahead and double click and get back in here. Now I can select just that guideline. Got to be careful not to actually get out of there. So if this was just one solid block, I could have just use the push-pull tool and push this back. But because we've got all this stuff here, it gets a little bit more tricky. So I'll show you, now that we've got this line right here, we know, okay, we don't want to go past those lines. Now I'm going to show you a couple of ways you can do this really, really quickly. It's not going to be pretty. This is SketchUp's version of demolition, essentially. So I'll show you how you can do that. Now, we're going to actually use the selection tool, but we're going to use the marquee aspect. Now, if you haven't watched our episode on the selection tool, or if it's been a while since you watched it, go back and watch it and pay specific attention to the part where I talk about using the marquee function, where you draw a selection box around something. But for now, I drag from right to left and get the dotted line marquee, just a quick little box right here. It selects everything that even just if 1 little inch of that stuff is in that marquee at the time, it gets selected. Now, that's just kind of a good overall, that gets a lot of stuff selected, and I don't want any of it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key. And looking around, it looks like did a pretty good job. I didn't get rid of anything past this line. It might take a couple tries. So just if you accidentally delete something that you didn't mean to, just undo. Don't worry about it. Also, when I mention anything that's caught in the marquee when you're dragging from right to left, don't worry. If you're in a group, it's not going to affect anything outside of that group. It's not going to select the crown molding and the walls back here, which is a pretty nice feature. I'm going to do the same thing, select all of these right here. In fact, I could go left to right and only select everything that's completely surrounded by my marquee. Select all that and delete it. And now I've just got these guys over here. So I'm just going to actually double click on each one of these faces to select the face and all surrounding lines. And then I've just got this one little weird line there. And there's just one more thing I'm going to do. When you delete stuff, sometimes the faces that you're working with get a little bit discombobulated. Yes, that is a technical term. So just right-click on them. If they turn purple, right-click on them and click Reverse Faces to make the white side face out. And now I'm just going to double-click out here, get out of there. Perfect. So now I've gotten rid of those two sections of cabinet. The remaining sections look great. Whoops, don't go through the cabinets. There we go. Looks good. Clean edges, no extra lines. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell when you're in that kind of weird inside of a group thing. Sometimes you miss things because the lines kind of blend in with the background. But if that's the case, just double click on the group again, go in and refine your selection, delete whatever else is there. And now we're going to do the same thing to our bottom cabinets here. And in this case, we can actually do something a little bit more interesting with this countertop. I'll double click on the countertop. And because this is a relatively simple shape, we can actually use the push-pull tool alone here. Select this and actually just push this part back. And we'll just actually just enter in 4 feet. And there we go. Click out here. Countertop done. And now we're going to do the same thing with the lower countertops. Because remember, we didn't do any of those fancy shelving that we did up here. We didn't do any of that down here. In fact, we can just select these front doors here and get rid of them like that. And then we can just double click on this block in here. Use the push-pull tool and push this back 4 feet. And now we're all set. We've got a nice section carved out for our fridge. Let's go ahead and move it in. Now, in this case, because I want it to be facing right up against these cabinets here, I'm going to select it by the corner of the fridge. Remember, figure out which corner of the fridge is going to go right back in here, because that's where I've got the most, I can make sure that it's right up against the wall and right up against the cabinets at the same time if I snap to this corner right here. So I'm going to make sure I grab the fridge by that corner, which is going to be right here. This corner right there. So I'm going to go ahead and select the fridge, switch to the move tool by hitting the M key, grab it by that corner right there, and now I can move along. Don't worry about all the weird stuff that's happening when you're moving it around. It's jumping all over the place. That's just because it's snapping to weird things as you move your cursor. Don't worry about it. And now we're just going to, best we can, snug it right back in there like so. And don't worry about this part. In fact, sometimes if you go underneath the house, you can actually see that corner right there. So, sometimes like when you're up here, as you're snapping it back there, you can't really see where it's snapping because the fridge is in the way. Whereas if you go underneath the floor, you can actually snap it to that corner like that and click. Being in 3D does have its advantages. You can go under the house in no time. And there we go. I'll just select off here. That looks fantastic. That fits very nicely. We've got a little bit of an edge on our wall right here now, but that's not a problem. Still got a nice amount of cabinet right here. Fridge seems to fit very well. I really like the stainless steel. Fantastic. That looks great. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is a sink. And this is going to get a little bit more interesting. So let's, just for starters, let's go ahead and find a sink real quick. Nothing too fancy. This one right here looks very nice. It's a double sink. It's got the faucet already attached. It's a simple model, but sometimes the simple models are all you need. So let's go ahead and download that. I'll go ahead and click the download model button, hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and actually just kind of stick this in my kitchen for the time being. Let's put the sink on our diagonal bar right here. That could be kind of interesting. So I'll go ahead and use the move tool and move the sink over here. And then I'll just rotate it at 45 degrees to match the rotation of our bar right there. Now, this is going to get pretty interesting because basically what we have to do is we have to make sure that we need to make this top flush with our bar right there. So let me show you what we're going to do actually. We're going to, first of all, just kind of give us an overhead view and just kind of position it where we want the sink. Which, that looks right there, that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to select, you notice how we've got this kind of like plate almost kind of thing. This part right up here, that's going to be raised over the countertop, but the bottom edge of that is what needs to lie flat on the countertop. So I'm going to grab it underneath there, lock myself to the up and down axis, or the blue axis, by hitting either the up or down arrow keys. And now I can only move it up or down. And I'm going to snap it to the top of my countertop right there. Select off. And at first glance, you might think, well, that looks fantastic. Our work here is done. Wrong. We've got the countertop covering our actual sink here. This gets a little bit problematic, but I'll show you how we can fix this. It's a different technique called intersecting. And it's really, really cool once you kind of figure out what it is and how you can use it. So let me show you what we're going to do here. Basically, what we need to do is we need to select this portion of our countertop here and delete it. So let me show you. Basically, what you would think you would do is you would double click on the countertop and go into the raw line and face mode, and then it's like, okay, well, the big problem is we basically need to make this its own face. So you might go in and think, oh, I'll just use the line tool and just start tracing around, but oh wait, there's a curve there, and how do I do that? This is going to take forever, and rather than waste 7 hours of your life doing this, we're going to basically automate that process with the intersect tool. No, it's not really a tool, it's another one of those commands that the mystical right-click menu has. So I'll show you how you can use that. But first I want to thank the people who make this show possible, 3D Connection. These guys make the Space Navigator, which is such a fantastic way to navigate in SketchUp rather than keyboard shortcuts and mouse movements and commands and all that stuff. This is so simple. It's like a joystick in SketchUp, a joystick for SketchUp. It just makes it so easy to move the camera around just by moving your hand in the direction you want to go. But that's only one way you can use it. That's camera mode. Another mode is where you're actually, it's kind of like reverse camera mode. It's hard to describe, but it's really very cool, where you're actually like holding the model in your hand. So rather than, using it like a joystick and controlling where you are in relation to the model, you're actually twisting it to cause the model to change in relationship to you. So if that makes any sense at all, it's like rather than twisting the device to the right to turn right, you actually twist it to the right to make the model turn to the right. So that would actually make you look left. But then it's like you're actually reaching out, grabbing the model, and actually rotating it with your hands, pushing and pulling things and moving through it with your hands. Now, which mode you would like to use is absolutely up to you. I mean, you can even set up a hotkey to switch between the two. Sometimes you might think, okay, this is a little bit better for this kind of work, but camera mode is better for presentations or something like that. It's really very cool. Definitely try it out and figure out which one is best for you. You can learn more about the Space Navigator at 3D Connection's website, which is www.3dconnection.com. Be sure to check them out. They make awesome stuff, and I want to thank them so much for sponsoring this episode of Sketchup, a 3D toolbox. Now back to this troublesome sink. I told you just before the break that we were going to be using intersecting to fix this problem, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, the way intersecting works, you need to do a little bit of setup for this. You need to have the surface or object that you want to carve stuff out of. Next, you need to have the object that is going to basically act as almost like a cookie cutter. So if you thought of this sink as like a cookie cutter, where you're actually sticking it in the object In this case, you're sticking it in the countertop, and then these holes, that's where we want to get rid of things. So that's where we want to take the cookies or the pieces of the countertop out. So you got to make sure you have that in there, stick it where you want it. And then the next step, once that's in there, we don't actually deal with the sink anymore. We're dealing with just the countertop at this point. I'm going to go ahead and double click a couple times and make sure that I'm in the raw line and face mode for my countertop. And I'm going to just triple click on the countertop to make sure I'm selecting everything. Now, you can't really do this with a group. It gets a little bit tricky with a group. So rather than do that, just go into the raw line and face mode of your countertop, triple click, or you could also do like a Command A to select everything within that group. And once you've got everything selected, you're going to right click somewhere on it, and you're going to choose, you notice this little drop down menu here, intersect, and then intersect with model. All right. Now, when you click that, watch what happens. It deselects everything, but look at what's happened here. These inside here are now their own faces. So we have this face out here and this face in here. Now, here's what's happened. Basically, what intersect with model does is use whatever you've selected. You don't have to do this with, your entire model, your entire group. You could just select this upper face here and just intersect that face. But it's easier in this case to do it with everything. But what it does is anywhere, anything else in the model, whether it's in that group or outside that group, anywhere it intersects with it, which in this case we have like this, this outer rim of the sink here, and then we have these inner rims here, these inner lines that we're punching through it like cookie cutters. It detects those, and anywhere it has those, it draws lines separating them out. So what you can do now is you can literally just, all the work is done for you. You just need to select this chunk in here and delete it. And you might need to delete it a couple times because remember, this is a double-layered cabinet, double-layered countertop. So there's the top layer, and then there's also the bottom layer right there. And just keep on selecting until, boom, we've gotten all those. We kind of carved out all that stuff, and now it's white because we still have the white under countertops right here. That's what we're seeing right here, but we've just gotten rid of the countertop for that. So that's done. So now we're making progress. So we can actually, we have a very shallow sink right now. So next what we're going to do is we're going to double click again, and we're going to get into the raw line and face mode of this white cabinet thing here. We don't need to worry about the doors because the doors aren't in the way, but this white cabinet thing here is in the way. I'm going to triple click on it to select everything, every line and every face. Right click on it, intersect with model. And look, it did the exact same thing. You can actually see, let me undo and redo for you. You see, I'll undo, this is before the intersecting. You see how there aren't really any lines there. Slightly grayed out lines, but that's it. Redo, the lines are back. They're black and they're very defined. That means that it has carved those lines into the model. So now I can just select that portion there, and that portion there. And now look at that. We can see right down into the sink. Let me go ahead and double click to get out of here. Look at that. That's perfect. Carved out a nice little hole. And look, you can even see the drain actually goes right down inside the cabinets. That's perfect. What's so wild about this is that on the surface, it seems very simple. The actual model seems very simple, very natural, looks perfect. But if you go actually inside the cabinet, you can see that we've got all this stuff poking down through here. It's just like a real sink, actually. And you can see that it actually, perfect lines right here. Like a perfect, it basically makes, it's kind of like in reverse. Rather than making the hole and then fitting the plug into it, you stick the plug through the surface and then it makes the hole for you. It's a very strange way of doing things, but it's one of the things about SketchUp that's really, really nice. And that intersect feature is really helpful. Well, I hope you found this episode useful. There's a lot of really powerful stuff that you can do with the Intersect tool. Now, until next time, be sure to visit our website at www.harwoodpodcast.com. I'll have the show notes for this episode, as well as all of our previous episodes that you can watch all the way back to episode 1, where we're talking about the very basics of Sketchup. And, of course, you can download the lesson files from there as well. And if you have any questions or comments for me about the show, send me an email at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you guys. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.